Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Let me preface this with a bit of background info. I studied martial arts for more than 10 years, and I have studied people even longer. I know when someone is dangerous. Hell, I was held at gunpoint and I wasn't scared. I was attacked by a pack of feral gypsies and I wasn't scared. But this guy scared me like no one else. So I was walking around the city center the other day, minding my own business, and all of a sudden I felt a terrible presence. I felt a terrible pressure on my entire person, and I could feel the earth shudder from behind me. By each second, the pressure was getting higher and higher. A loose pebble skipped next to me and I almost screamed. I could hear footsteps now from behind me. I felt this immense power reaching out from behind me. I tensed up, making myself more intimidating in turn, and as soon as I shifted my balance and posture, the pressure loosened up and I could breathe again. Then a few seconds later, a guy in his 40s, dressed as plainly and unassumingly as ever, walked past me. He gave me a short glance and a nod and kind of vanished in the crowd. I could still feel him, but I didn't feel the immense negative energy emanating from him. Nobody else seemed to care too much about him. That day I had a drink, the first one in 2 years. I was shivering. What the hell was that /x/ and do you have any similar experiences?
It's called gut instinct. Something was off about the guy, and you subconsciously keyed in. I still get it sometimes from the most harmless appearing people or places. It's from working the graveyard for 6 years. Everyone is unnerving at 3 a.m. on a weeknight.
I couldn't have felt him from that far behind using just my subconsciousness. I mean, sure, all the drilling and practicing did something to hone my senses, but the guy didn't skip a beat. He just continued walking like it was nothing. Like he didn't plan to, I don't know, surprise me or something. In all seriousness though, he wasn't even creepy or anything. Just a guy. That's the most disturbing thing. His posture didn't even seem to be, I'm a badass, I could wipe everyone in the park out.
Yeah, it happens. I almost gave an old maintenance guy a heart attack because something was off about him. Everything checked out with him, and still I feel like something is off when he responds to an emergency at a unit. My hair stands on end if I haven't even noticed him yet. I even prayed a little because we cross paths a lot. Not a fellow vet, lived here his entire life, did construction when he was younger, and had a happy family. Probably been in a handful of fights when he was younger, but pretty boring guy now.
I hate to tell you this, but it's always the boring ones who are serial killers.
I'm afraid of creeping people out, so I work really hard to shut off awful thoughts that seem to inadvertently pop up when I'm interacting with the public. People tell me I'm nice though, so maybe the effort to think kinder things is worthwhile. And perhaps that's the difference between average angry Joe and an actual bad person. The urge to censure the worst thoughts. If I let them run rampant, I might feel compelled to act on them after long enough. Anyways, I had a friend who was very in tune. Probably the realest wizard I'll ever encounter. Worked out and got jacked after a life of being bullied by dumb rednecks. Anyways, he told me a similar story about a guy with whom he used to smoke pot amongst a group of friends. A lot of them were harmlessly shady, but I remember he told me that one person in the group gave him the worst vibe. Although this person was polite and withdrawn. My friend said that he got the most awful feelings, especially while partaking in hallucinogens with this person, and felt that this person was or would be a murderer. IDK. But I think being in touch with your physical body will help you pick up on things that are off, and that sounds woo-woo, but in my opinion the sense of smell is severely underrated. And I think that a lot of psychic impressions are gleaned from picking up on smells that are imperceptible or abstract enough to be distinctly named, but that are registered nonetheless. Like how an animal will react to bad people. Does evil have a smell, or can a sensitive enough observer detect blood, fear, anger, etc.? Anyways, trust your instincts, OP, and keep up the martial arts. That's cool.
This though. I used to work as a grocery bagger and shopping cart wrangler. There was a post box outside the store, and the mailman that always came creeped me the hell out. He was delivering to the gym I was at one day and still creeped me out. Turned out he was the guy that delivered to the apartments my friend and I moved into, and my friend's dog didn't like him. And it wasn't like he disliked all mailmen. He loved the one dude he met, just that one guy. I don't know about smell or anything, but it's definitely an innate sense.
A hormonal spike caused an emotional response in you. Probably the spike was severe enough to cause fight-flight response. Then you looked around and decided that a normal average-looking dude must be the cause of this emotional response. So you justified the emotional response by declaring this normal average dude to be highly dangerous. It was already proven in the 1970s that people first form emotions in their primitive lizard brain. After a delay, the neocortex, seat of ego identity in brain, starts analyzing the surrounding to make up a story about why you are emotional after the emotion was already formed. If there is no reason for the emotion in the immediate surroundings, the neocortex makes up a BS reason which will feel completely real for the person experiencing it. The research is mostly forgotten now because it explained the behavior too well. People threw a hissy fit and tried to shut it down.
Only time I ever felt like this was a couple months back. I stopped at a stoplight, and there was this bald guy standing on the sidewalk next to where I pulled up. Bald, about 6.5 feet tall, standing perfectly straight with his head tilted upwards at about 20 degrees. Felt an overwhelming sense of dread from when I stopped to when the light turned green. Long-ass light, too. Guy never moved a muscle or shifted his stare from whatever he was looking at. Don't even remember what he was wearing because every inch of my body was screaming at me to not take a good look at him.
There was this party house I frequented for a short time for a few months of my life. Many people come and go. There were regulars, but many I only ever had seen one time after many weeks of going daily. People always buy drugs, but the only one time did someone do what OP said, basically. This one guy came in, and it was like a static field that radiated 10 feet off him. Nobody acted like anything was wrong. I noticed when he walked by. I was at the kitchen table with some others. It's near the front door. I noticed when him and his friends left. I know it was the taller one because of the fact when they entered, they scattered slowly. One of them came to the table. None of them regulars. They left, and I never saw any of them again.
I used to sell product when I was 18. Knew other deals in the area. Sometimes we'd pool our resources or share customers. My high school teachers were wrong. I'm a genius. Knew one guy that was always sketchy. Sold weed, but also pills and cocaine. He was in his late 30s. Looked like a serial killer, quite. When he did talk, it was always some deep, creepy shit. Too much of this stuff could kill a person. You'd be amazed at how easy it is to watch that. He also never blinked, like ever. I don't think I saw him blink once. I'm too scared of this guy to blow him off. Occasionally, I'd meet with him for a trade. He calls me saying to meet him off of a park trail. He has a big bag of product he owed me. I don't really want to, but I need that bag. Pull up to the secluded spot off the main road. He's just standing there, does not move or say anything. Sixth sense is detecting bullshit. He waves for me to come over, but stays standing there. Nope. Wave for him to come over. He doesn't. We both stay in our spots, waving at each other like idiots. He seems to get mad, angrily waving. I roll down my window and tell him to just toss the bag. Hands in his pockets, he marches over to my car. Nope again. Hit reverse and peel out. Don't even make an effort to be subtle. Tell all my other dealer friends to watch out for that guy. I think he's finally snapped. Pfft, you're the one who's crazy and on. A few days later, hear that one of them did meet with him for a similar trade, and he and some junkie jumped him, beat him, and robbed him. I've since moved. Cops looked for him for a while, but he ran. Rumor was he owed somebody bigger money. If I ever go back to town, I'm sure he'd try to find me.
Seeing this thread just reminded me of a childhood story I hadn't thought about in something like 10 years. Be 7 or 8. Paris suburbs. School is huge with many buildings. There must have been 1,500 kids in that school, and the playground is really big. A part of that playground is some sort of wasteland along the back of one of the bigger buildings. It is bounded by a fence going all around it. On the other side are people's houses and backyards. One of these houses seems abandoned. A tall house, grim-looking, dirty with windows broken. The backyard is literally, not exaggerating here, filled with several inches of food wrapping and random garbage. An old woman is rumored to be living there. My neighbor, who was older, 13, knew about this myth, so it had been going on for years. Kids nickname her Pupuche. There's always some older 11 years old to claim he has seen her, or even entered the house, typical school legend everyone is familiar with. It's always who's going to go further. The more ballsy would throw rocks at the remaining windows. Others would climb the fence and stand in the backyard to impress others. Hell, I did it many times to get a ball back. Some typical day, recess, joking around looking at the house as usual. Holy shit. An old woman's face, crazy eyes, white messy hair, is visible behind the window of the first floor. She's real. No way. Even those who claimed they had seen her before look like they just shat bricks. The face disappears. Everyone gets crazy about it. Suddenly, the back door opens. She's just there, outside, staring at us from behind the fence. Everyone's quiet. Have you ever seen a bunch of 8-year-old kids quiet? That's quite rare. Pupuche incoherently screams like a witch out of a movie for a solid 15 seconds. Everyone freaked out. She goes back inside. About a week later, summer holidays came. When school resumed, the house was for sale. Walls painted, windows changed, and the backyard was empty. Never heard of Pupuche again.
Driving home from work late one night. Pull into a gas station and walk into the little store attached to it to pay for the gas. As I was coming out of the door, some random guy looked to be about 40, well-dressed, walked up to me and said, "I need an outside line, please." I asked him what he was talking about, thinking it was the beginning of a joke. He repeated himself. I just kind of looked at him, confused. He smiled at me and said, "Nice truck. They don't make them like that anymore," and then walked over to it and kind of slid his hand over the hood. I just walked away from him and started to pump the gas. He stared at me the entire time and then walked in the store. A few seconds later, he came out and yelled across the parking lot, "Hey, I need an outside line." I finished up and got back in my truck. He walked up to the window and gestured for me to roll down the window. I rolled down the window and asked if he was all right. He just stared at me and said, "Operator, can you connect me?" I pulled away from the pump and parked. I went into the store again and told the guy behind the counter about him. The store clerk spoke very broken English, but picked up the phone like he was going to call the cops. The guy walked into the store and went up to the desk and said, "Finally, I need an outside line."
This might not be a legit crazy person encounter, but it probably was. At college, late in the day, walking back from class, hardly anyone else around, but it's still light out. A skinny, balding guy in his 30s suddenly walks up to me and pulls this big tome of a book out of a bag of roughly the same size. It's a really nice, Skyrim-sized, leather-bound navy blue hardcover of at least $40 to $50 quality. Absolutely no title or text on the front, back, or binding, but easily approaching 1,000 pages. Hands it to me in a subtle manner and doesn't say a word or make any indicating gestures. The whole situation was awkward and unexpected, so I tell him I don't want it and give it back. He keeps staring at my face unflinchingly and tries to hand me the book again. I keep telling him no, and he keeps trying to hand it over. I start walking again, and he follows me for a good while in silence with the book in tow as if I was going to change my mind and take it. This entire time he maintains the same dead look on his face and never breaks eye contact. A few minutes later, outpace him until I move around a corner and finally break eye contact. Never saw him again, and I'll never know what the hell was in that book. All I know is that it wasn't the Bible or a Quran. There were far too many pages, it was too wide, and it surely would have had a title. I like to think it was full of Illuminati-related stuff, but it was probably just the ramblings of a crazy person with enough money to print his own book.
First year in high school. Live in a relatively large city, take the bus to school. Middle-aged lady walks on the bus, asks for change. Tell her sorry, I spent all my change on the bus. She tells me it's all right and sits in an isolated area. Starts muttering to herself instinctively, but enough for other passengers to hear her. Whenever someone would sit nearby, she'd ask them for change. Crazy, black, muttering lady's murmurs starting to get louder and louder. At this point, you could clearly hear her from across the bus. but wouldn't be able to understand shit, practically screaming stuff about hellfire and God save us all in a heavy Jamaican accent. Few silent pauses in between murmurs, but every time she seemingly increases her volume. Start to see her on the same bus almost once a week, still asking for change throughout all my high school years. One time she wasn't muttering and screaming. Decide to test my new theory. Give her $1. She says, "God bless you," and keeps murmuring about the weird shit she mutters. Give her the equivalent of nearly $5 in charge. Says "God bless" again, but this time doesn't say a thing for the rest of the ride, even though other passengers denied her request. Start going to college. Occasionally see her on some bus trips. She's still asking for change and mutters loudly when people haven't given her enough. One time taking the bus to work, see her with a 12-year-old little girl with a backpack, holding her hand. Start driving. Never have to listen to her insane rambling ever again. Go to Tim Hortons because coffee. She's at the parking lot asking for change. She was known by my high school friends as Crazy Muttering Lady, and she's at multiple places at all times.
About 2 years ago, I met this random chick that moved into my apartment building. She kind of came off as weird even before I started to hang out with her. She was in her late 20s, anorexic, thin, blonde dreads. She was kind of cute in her own way. One thing that I noticed right away is she would never make eye contact with anyone, and she would go out of her way to avoid talking to people. She lived across the hall from me. No one ever came to visit her, and she lived alone. Late at night, I could hear her door opening and closing and footsteps in the hall that would go on for hours sometimes. One night when I heard her door open at 3 in the morning, I was still awake watching TV. I went out to the hall and asked her if everything was okay. She told me she is an insomniac and sometimes walking around would help her sleep. Whatever I invited her in to hang out told her I couldn't sleep either. We talked about a bunch of random shit. She seemed kinda normal. I actually felt kinda bad for her. Eventually, she went back to her apartment. The next day, she saw me getting into my truck and stopped me and asked if I wanted to hang out again. I told her I was headed to work and told her I was going out drinking with a few of my buddies later on. I asked if she wanted to tag along. She awkwardly made up an excuse about how she had to be at the apartment to feed her cat. She didn't have a cat. I ended up coming back to the apartment around 2 in the morning, and I saw her sitting in the hallway. I asked if everything was okay. She started crying. I said something along the lines of, "It's okay, come in and talk about what's going on." She came into my apartment and started going on some rant about how there's cameras in her pens and microphones in her mirror, and she doesn't know who she can trust. WTF. I don't know what to say to her. So I told her to go to the police. She starts to tell me that people dressed as shadows follow her around and a bunch of weird shit. Over the course of the following few months, she began to get really clingy to me and would follow me around and constantly call me and knock on my door. Eventually, she ended up getting committed. I never knew exactly what happened, but I visited her a few times. I spent a lot of time with her when I lived in the building. It's weird I spent a lot of time with her but didn't know that much about her. She would never talk about her family or where she was from. She wouldn't hang out with any of my friends if I had people over. She would just wait till they left and then come knocking on my door. Everyone that lived in the building thought she was insane. She would obsessively use a treadmill every night around 2:30 in the morning. There was a gym in the building, and she would stick to the same routine every day. I would know exactly what time she was going to call me or knock on my door. She would order pizza every night at the same time. She would leave the apartment to go to the convent store a few times a week, but it always seemed scheduled. One night I was watching a movie in her apartment with her. This was when we first met. And I went to use her bathroom, and I noticed that the mirror on the medicine cabinet had duct tape covering it so you couldn't see a reflection. I always thought that was weird. She did the same thing with her bedroom mirrors too. And if she had to see her reflection to put on makeup and shit, she would use the camera on her phone. She was cute, and I always thought that there was something between us, but she was just too insane to deal with sometimes. She would go through these manic episodes where she would cry constantly and talk to herself. She was also a really bad hoarder. When she would go through one of her insane episodes, she would dig through piles of old notes and notebooks and read random shit she wrote months before and act like it was evidence to what was currently going on in her mind. It's really hard to explain, like if she saw a red Toyota parked in front of a McDonald's, for example, when she was going through one of her episodes. If she deemed it out of place, she would take a note of it, and then forget all about it till she would go through another one of her episodes. And then she would find the note and start acting like every red truck she saw was suspicious.
I come from a small town with a psych center that was abruptly closed around 20 years ago. So I got a few short stories. A mass grave for all the dead, unclaimed crazies is also right behind my backyard. Nothing paranormal, though. Okay, here's the first one from my cousin when she was growing up here. Knows people that work at the loony bin. Here's stories of one man that is completely sane except for the fact that he has full-blown conversations with veggies. Here's that he's let go because he stopped all of a sudden. The next day, I saw some guy at the grocery store asking Peppers how their morning was going. He went back to his fruit-talking antics the second they let him out. There was also a guy that had a lobotomy who would just stand at an intersection all day and pretend to direct traffic. Any attempts to talk to him would get, "You have a nickel?" with that glazed-over Chris Chan look on his face invariably. Crazy lady plays the violin at the train station at 3 a.m. sometimes. My brother once had a person wearing 4 hats at once ask him for a hat. Another time he had Nickel Man's son ask him for a nickel. And that's about it. Nothing spectacular, though my dad could see them dumping bodies in the grave behind our house growing up. Pretty spoopy.
This experience is actually a big driving force behind why I believe the paranormal is normal now. This happened a few years ago here in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I was leaving a nightclub. It was about 3 a.m. I was alone. I had to walk to the bus stop from the nightclub. Now, I'm no saint, but that night I had maybe 2 bottles of beer, small bottles of beer. I just wasn't feeling the vibe, and I wanted to go home, so between the nightclub and the bus stop, there is a train track. When I get to the train track, I hear the railroad crossing bells start to ring, so I stop and wait. Directly across from me, on the other side of the tracks, there is a metal sort of railing that you wait at, and I see this person walking up to the railing. It looked like a homeless person or somebody that was living, on the streets. The person also had what looked like to be a bottle in his hand, and he was drinking the bottle, so I assumed it was just a homeless person or, a drunk or somebody that was in a bad situation, living on the streets. It was late. There was nobody around, just me and this person. I was looking over at the person because they were kind of looking at me while they were drinking from their bottle, but because it was nighttime and they were a bit further away, I couldn't make out their facial features. I could tell that they didn't have any hair on their head. They were bald. I think maybe they didn't have shoes on. Like I said, this happened a few years ago in 2016, so forgive me if I struggle with some of the details. So this person sort of gets really close to the tracks and starts chugging the bottle, chugging it back, and I'm looking at them going like, what is this person doing? They're too close to the tracks. The train is going to come right now. The train is coming right now. And they look, like I thought it was somebody that was wasted and they were going to end themselves on the track without noticing because they were so drunk. So I start to scream at the person on the track to get off the track because the train is coming. Looking over at them, and I'm screaming at him, telling him to move back away from the track. He's too close to the track. Now, I think he threw the bottle, and this is something that I clearly remember because this is where it got really crazy. So the train is getting closer and closer, and this person isn't moving, but I'm still yelling at them, telling them to back up from the tracks. The train is coming. It's getting closer and closer, louder and louder. I'm screaming. The person is not moving. The light from the train is shining, and it gets closer and closer. The person opens up their arms almost like, that big Jesus statue in Brazil? Sort of like Jesus on the cross kind of thing, arms wide open like if you're going to give somebody a bear hug. He turns around, makes eye contact with me, and falls forward right onto the track. I saw their head touch the track on one side and their legs touch the track on the other side, and the train just went and passed right over. While this guy did this, he made eye contact with me and the train hit him. The train light lit him up. I realized he had no hair on his face, he was bald, and he didn't seem like He didn't even have eyebrows. I'm serious, like no hair. I start freaking out at this point. I completely lost it. I'm yelling at the train that they ran somebody over. I'm still alone, I'm yelling, and the train stops and I'm thinking, oh my God, I just saw somebody off themselves, like what is going on? The first thing I did when the train stopped was go directly to where I saw him throw himself under the train, and I looked under the train. Now when I look under the train, obviously, I see what anyone would see. What looked like a mangled kind of body, right? Somebody twisted like a pretzel. It was dark, so I didn't really see much, but just that image made me fall back. I looked away. When I looked back, the person was in a crouch. I don't even know how to say this or how to explain this. This is why I don't like telling this story. It was like they were in a crouched position, but it didn't make sense logically because the space was too small. It was like they were mangled, and then I looked back and they were like in a crouched position, and it was like he was looking back at me for a second, and then he ran, and at this point, I'm just overloaded with too much. There's too much going on here. I'm freaking out completely. My brain can't even process what's happening. This cop, I think he got off the train. He walks up to me and he says, "Why did you yell? What's going on?" And I said, "They ran somebody over. They ran somebody over." That's all I could say because I was like in shock. I pointed to where the person was, but I still couldn't believe what I saw. So I thought he was still there. I thought I was in shock. The cop looks and there's nothing there, obviously, because what was there was now gone. I'm like, no, they ran somebody over. He was right there. It was a dead guy there. The cop is looking at me like, "You're crazy." Like he asked me, "Are you on drugs or something?" I'm like, "No, like totally no. I swear to you there was somebody there. I swear to you." And while I'm saying that, out of the darkness comes an actual homeless person, and he's freaking out. The homeless person is freaking out. I think he was pushing like a cart. He was pulling a cart or something, but I remember that he was freaking out because he was saying, "The kid isn't lying. There was something there," and he ran out the other side. The kid isn't lying. He's not lying. I get so uncomfortable whenever I tell this story. I start to get like cold. It's just weird. I start feeling really weird. At this point, there's like traffic behind me, the cops here, the homeless guy's here freaking out, praying. Here's where I just got this sense of fear, like terror. The train conductor gets off the train, walks up to us, and the cop is super mad and says, "Where's the guy that I ran over? Where's the guy that threw himself on the track?" And the cop's like, "There is no guy." And I'm like, "There's a guy. There was a guy there." And the train conductor looks at me and says, "He's not lying." To the cop, "I saw the guy. We ran over a guy." Just telling you guys this story is like bringing back those emotions that I was feeling that night. The conductor got back on the train. The cop, I think, was on the train, so he got back and the train left. The traffic goes by and then I'm alone, and there was just something about this experience and that fear that I felt after that and that confusion. It was like my mind couldn't grasp it. I couldn't explain it. So for the next week, the next month, I was just trying to figure out what that was. I was trying to figure out what it meant. I'll just be 100% honest with you guys. It was very, very frightening, only because I felt in my gut like that was supposed to happen to me, like it was a warning or a sign or something. I couldn't really tell anybody either because the story gets so crazy at certain points, like when he's mangled and then he's unmangled. I was afraid to actually talk about it with people for some reason. I've always been into the paranormal and the fringe ever since I was young. I've been looking into those kinds of things and I can't really ignore it. I can't. It's something that happens naturally, but there have been moments in my life where I just forced myself to ignore it. I forced myself not to look into it because sometimes the rabbit hole gets so big that you end up more lost than when you first started researching or when you first started. It seems like the phenomenon sort of does that, like it has some sort of intelligence that helps keep it secret.
This thread is nice. Think I'll post my story. Be me, in a convenience store to buy soda and chips. An old lady and a younger woman, daughter, enters. An old lady mumbles about how her baby needs food. The baby is hungry. Was cleaning glasses. Didn't care too much for the old lady. Cleaned. Put the glasses on. It's a whole new world. .jpg. I focus more on the baby. It's a realistic baby doll you see in kids' commercials. She keeps mumbling, "Baby very sick. Baby very sick." Daughter looks at me with a Please don't say anything. Look. The guy next to me notices the baby. Hey, lady, yo, what the fuck? That ain't a baby. The lady freaks out, yells at the top of lungs, and starts bashing the table. How dare you? How dare you? I'm a coward. I walk away when shit hits the fan. Lady ends up holding the poor Hindu owner of the store hostage. It took the cops about 3 hours for them to convince the lady to go with them. My face when didn't even get the soda I came for.
There's a special needs woman who lives near me who has an in-home worker with her at all times. She has a baby that she carries around at all times, and everyone just goes with it. Pretty odd, but she's not hurting anyone. What kind of person would see someone who's obviously mentally damaged and decide to tell them that something that they cling to isn't real? Very cruel, in my opinion.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.